The breath that caught in Alexander Bourne's throat wasn't from sleep. It was from pure, primal fear. He lay frozen in his king-sized bed, eyes clamped shut, every muscle in his body locked tight as footsteps whispered across the marble floor of his penthouse bedroom. The clock glowed at 2:47 a.m. No one should be here. No one except the two people he foolishly invited into his home, into his sanctuary, into the heart of everything he built. His maid, Elena, and her son. The boy who never smiled. The boy whose eyes always seemed to see too much. Alexander had planned this test so carefully. He pretended to take his sleeping medication early, made a show of yawning, stumbling to bed. He left his wallet on the dresser, thick with cash and credit cards that could drain his accounts. His safe sat deliberately ajar, sensitive documents visible inside. He even positioned himself facing away from the door, vulnerable and exposed like a lamb waiting for wolves. He wanted to know what people did when they thought no one was watching. He wanted to catch them in their truth. What he didn't expect was the voice that shattered the darkness like breaking glass. "I could end this tonight, Mama. Right now. He's right there." Alexander's blood turned to ice, not from the words themselves, but from the tone. So cold, so measured, so impossibly ancient for a 17-year-old boy. "Ethan, please." Elena's voice trembled, barely louder than breathing. "Please, we talked about this. We agreed. We've talked for 5 years." The boy, Ethan, moved closer. Alexander could feel the air shift around him, could sense the presence standing over his bed like death itself. 5 years I've watched him sleep in silk sheets while Papa's grave doesn't even have a headstone. 5 years I've scrubbed his floors, ironed his expensive suits, smiled and nodded when he walks past me like I'm invisible, like I'm nothing. Alexander's heart slammed against his ribs so violently he was certain they could see his chest moving beneath the covers. Every survival instinct in his body screamed at him to open his eyes, to sit up, to defend himself. But terror held him captive in his own charade. Who was this boy? What father was he talking about? "Your father wouldn't want this," Elena whispered, and Alexander heard her grab her son's arm and heard the rustle of fabric. "Revenge won't bring him back. It won't heal anything. It'll only destroy you." "This isn't revenge, Mama." Ethan's voice dropped to something darker, something that made Alexander's skin crawl with dread. "Revenge is what I wanted when I was 12 years old and found you crying over that eviction notice. Revenge is what I dreamed about every night we slept in that homeless shelter, when you cleaned toilets for minimum wage while he—" a pause. Venomous, dripping with years of pain. "While he bought his third vacation home, while he celebrated another record-breaking quarter, while he slept like a king and never once thought about the lives he crushed to build his throne." Each word was a knife, and Alexander felt every single one pierce through his chest. Eviction, shelter, a father in an unmarked grave. His mind raced backward through decades of ruthless business, hostile takeovers, companies absorbed and destroyed without a second thought. How many lives had he ruined? How many families had he torn apart? How many fathers had he sent to early graves? The answer terrified him. He didn't know. He never bothered to count. "This is justice," Ethan continued, and Alexander heard papers rustling and heard the crinkle of what sounded like files or folders. "Everything's here, Mama. Every forged signature, every bribed official, every illegal deal that built his empire on other people's suffering. 5 years of gathering proof while I played the role of the obedient maid's son, the quiet boy who knew his place." More rustling. The sound of evidence of reckoning. The media contacts are lined up. The federal prosecutors are waiting. The whistleblower lawyers have everything ready. One phone call, Mama. Just one. And Alexander Bourne doesn't just lose his company. He loses everything. His reputation. His freedom. His legacy becomes a warning instead of an inspiration. The silence that followed felt like drowning. Alexander wanted to scream, to confess, to beg for mercy, but he remained frozen in his self-made prison, listening to his entire world crumble at 2:47 in the morning because of a test that had gone horribly, devastatingly wrong. "Then why haven't you made that call?" Elena's voice cracked with emotion, thick with tears. "Baby, if you have everything you need, why are we standing in his bedroom in the middle of the night? Why haven't you already destroyed him?" The pause stretched on forever. "Because I wanted him to know." The footsteps moved closer. Alexander felt a presence lean down beside the bed, felt warm breath near his ear, and it took everything in him not to flinch, not to gasp, not to give himself away. I wanted him to know that Justice was sleeping in his servant's quarters all this time, eating his table scraps, watching him every single day. I wanted him to feel what Papa felt in those final months. Powerless, exposed, trapped, waiting for the end he knows is coming but can't stop. A hand touched the blanket near Alexander's shoulder. Not violent, not threatening, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. But mostly, Mama. Ethan's voice softened, and Alexander heard something break in it, something human beneath all that cold determination. Mostly, I wanted to give him the choice Papa never got. The chance to do the right thing before everything falls apart. The opportunity to be better than the monster who destroyed our family. Alexander's mind screamed into the void. What choice? What did this boy want? And God help him, whose father had he killed? Because he understood now, with sickening clarity, that somewhere in his past, his greed had murdered someone. Maybe not with his own hands, but with his decisions. His callousness, his complete lack of human decency. Tomorrow morning, Ethan whispered, and Alexander knew with absolute certainty that the boy knew he was awake, that this entire conversation had been staged for his ears. Mr. Bourne is going to wake up and find a manila envelope on his breakfast table. Inside is a phone number, just 10 digits, one call. What happens when he calls? Elena asked, though her voice said she already knew. He confesses, everything, publicly. He establishes a $10 million fund for every family his company destroyed. He turns himself in to federal authorities. He accepts whatever punishment the law demands. And if he does all that, if he chooses accountability over arrogance, then the evidence I've gathered stays private. His legacy becomes redemption instead of ruin. His story becomes about a man who faced his sins and tried to make them right. Alexander's throat tightened. $10 million. Public confession, prison, and if he doesn't call... Elena's question hung in the darkness like a noose. Then the world wakes up Tuesday morning to discover exactly who Alexander Bourne really is. Every news outlet, every social media platform, every person he's ever impressed or inspired, they'll all know. And I'll finally get to watch him lose everything, piece by piece, the way Papa did, the way we did. The footsteps retreated slowly, deliberately. The door opened with a soft click. Before it closed, Ethan's voice drifted back one final time. Sleep well, Mr. Bourne, if you can. The door clicked shut, and Alexander Bourne lay in his $10,000 mattress, in his penthouse overlooking the city he conquered, surrounded by luxury built on broken lives, absolutely paralyzed by the realization that he had never been in control at all. Justice had been living under his roof for 5 years. Watching, studying, waiting, and now it was demanding an answer. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Soul Tales. I hope your heart is already pounding because trust me, we are just getting started with this one. This story is going to shake you. It's going to make you feel things. And it's going to remind you that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't violence. It's patience, truth, and the courage to demand justice. I want you to drop a comment below right now and tell me, where are you watching from? What time is it in your corner of the world? And listen, if you're new to the Soul Tales family, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button because stories like this dig deep into the human soul. Now let me tell you about Ethan, the boy who turned revenge into something far more dangerous. The test was never about loyalty. It was about judgment. And Alexander Bourne was about to discover that some debts can't be paid in money, only in truth, only in courage, only in facing the man he became. The dawn came too quickly. Alexander hadn't slept. How could he? He lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying every word Ethan had spoken, every accusation, every truth. At 6:15 a.m., he finally sat up. His hands trembled as he reached for his robe. The man who commanded boardrooms, who built an empire worth billions, who never showed weakness, that man was gone. In his place sat someone Alexander barely recognized, someone afraid. He spent his entire adult life being Alexander Bourne, the success story, the self-made billionaire, the man on magazine covers with the headline, The Midas Touch. But how many King Midas stories ended well? How many men who turned everything to gold realized too late that gold couldn't hug you back, couldn't forgive you, couldn't love you. His daughter, Christina, hadn't called in 3 years. His ex-wife refused to speak his name. His son had moved to Europe to escape the shadow of the Bourne Empire. He told himself it didn't matter. Success requires sacrifice. Empires weren't built by soft men. But last night, lying frozen in his bed, listening to a 17-year-old boy speak about justice with the voice of someone who suffered deeply, Alexander had felt something he buried for decades. Shame. He walked down the spiral staircase, each step heavier than the last. The penthouse was silent except for the sound of his breathing. Elena usually arrived at 7. He had 45 minutes before he'd have to face her. The manila envelope sat on his breakfast table like an executioner's blade. His hands shook as he picked it up. Inside, a single piece of paper with a phone number written in neat, careful handwriting. Below it, 3 words, "You have today." That's when he heard it. A sound from the kitchen. Someone was already here. Alexander's heart seized. He walked slowly toward the sound, and there stood Elena, her back to him, preparing coffee the way she had every morning for 5 years. "Elena," he said softly. She flinched but didn't turn around. "Good morning, Mr. Bourne. Your coffee will be ready in a moment." The formality felt like a wall between them. For 5 years, this woman had worked in his home. 5 years he barely looked at her, barely spoke beyond instructions and complaints. She was furniture to him, invisible labor, and he never once asked about her life, her story, her pain. "I was awake last night," he said. Her hand froze on the coffee pot. The silence stretched like a knife being slowly twisted. "I heard everything." Elena's shoulders began to shake. She set down the pot carefully, precisely, then turned to face him. Her eyes were red from crying, her face exhausted. But there was something else there, too, something fierce and protective. "Then you know what my son is capable of," she whispered. "Tell me about him," Alexander said. "Tell me about Ethan, about his father. Tell me what I did to your family." A tear rolled down Elena's cheek. "You don't remember, do you? You destroyed so many lives that you can't even remember which one was ours." The words hit like a physical blow. 7 years ago, Elena's voice cracked. "You acquired Morrison Tech, a small company in Seattle. The founder, David Morrison, my husband, he built that company from nothing. It was his dream, his legacy. He employed 60 people, good people, families who depended on him." Alexander's mind raced. Morrison Tech. He remembered the acquisition. Barely. It had been a minor deal, one of dozens that year. "You promised to keep everyone employed," Elena continued, her voice breaking. "You shook David's hand. You looked him in the eye and promised. He believed you. He trusted you." "And then," Alexander whispered, though he already knew, 3 months later, you liquidated everything, sold the patents to your competitors, fired everyone, kept the real estate, and converted it into luxury condos." Elena's hands clenched into fists. David went from a successful entrepreneur to unemployed at 45. No one would hire him. They all said he was too old, too specialized. We lost our house, our savings, everything. "What happened to him?" Alexander asked, though his heart already knew the answer. "He had a heart attack 18 months after you destroyed his life. Ethan found him." Elena's voice broke completely. "My 12-year-old son found his father dead on the floor of our one-bedroom apartment, the apartment we could barely afford, the life you reduced us to." Alexander felt his knees weaken. He grabbed the counter for support. "I wanted to die too," Elena whispered. "But I had Ethan, so I cleaned houses, worked 3 jobs, and my brilliant, beautiful boy, instead of being a child, became a man overnight. He took care of me when I fell apart. He researched you, studied you, found out everything about your business practices, your illegal deals, your corruption." She stepped closer, and Alexander saw the mother bear behind the maid's uniform. "When he turned 15, he made me apply for this job. He said, 'Mama, we're going to get close to him. We're going to show him who we are without telling him. And we're going to give him the choice Papa never got, to be a better man or to fall like the monster he is.'" Alexander's vision blurred. "Why didn't you stop him?" "Because he was right," Elena said simply. "You need to answer for what you've done. Not just to us, but to all of them. All the families you destroyed while you slept in silk sheets and bought vacation homes." Footsteps on the stairs made them both turn. Ethan stood at the bottom of the staircase, dressed for school in a simple hoodie and jeans. He looked like any other teenager, except for his eyes. Those eyes had seen too much, survived too much, carried too much weight. He held up his phone. "It's 6:47, Mr. Bourne. You have until midnight tonight. One call. That's all it takes to choose redemption over ruin." "And if I run?" Alexander asked. "If I disappear? Flee the country?" Ethan's smile was cold. "Then you prove you're exactly the man Papa said you were, and the evidence goes public before you make it to the airport. But something tells me you won't run, because last night, for the first time in 7 years, you felt something you've been running from." "What's that?" "The weight of all those lives you crushed, the guilt you buried under success and greed." Ethan's voice softened, just slightly. "My father used to say that every man gets a moment where he can choose who he really is. He never got his moment. You're getting yours." Ethan walked past him toward the door, then paused. "There's a woman named Sarah Chen. You bought her restaurant's building and tripled the rent. She lost everything. There's a man named Thomas Wright. You framed him for embezzlement to cover your own illegal accounting. He spent 3 years in prison. There's a family named the Johnsons. You foreclosed on their home 2 days before Christmas. Each name was a bullet. Each story is a wound. Those are just 3, Mr. Bourne. I have 47 more. 47 families whose lives you destroyed and never looked back. Today, you get to decide if you're brave enough to face them, to face yourself." The door closed behind him. Alexander stood alone in his penthouse, a billionaire surrounded by luxury, holding a phone number that could either save his soul or destroy his empire. For the first time in decades, he had to make a choice that money couldn't buy his way out of. Alexander spent the morning doing what he always did when faced with impossible situations. He called his lawyers. "Absolutely not," Marcus Whitmore, his lead attorney, said over speakerphone. "You will not confess to anything. This sounds like extortion. We'll bury this kid in lawsuits. We'll destroy his credibility. He has evidence, Marcus." Silence on the other end. "What kind of evidence?" Marcus's voice had gone cold, professional. "Everything. 7 years of it. Documents I thought were destroyed, deals I thought were buried, bribes, forgeries, illegal acquisitions." Alexander stared out at the city skyline, his city, built on broken dreams. "He's been living in my house for 5 years, gathering it all. Then we're looking at serious prison time if this goes public. 20 years minimum, maybe more." Marcus paused. "We need to neutralize the threat. Pay him off. Make him disappear. I know people who can." "No." The word surprised Alexander as much as it surprised Marcus. "Alexander, be reasonable. This is your life, your empire. Everything you've built was built on other people's suffering," Alexander finished. "I heard him talking last night, Marcus. This boy, Ethan, he's 17 years old, and he sounds like a man who's lived through war. Because I created that war. I killed his father. Not with my hands, but with my greed. Legally, you didn't kill anyone. Morally, I murdered him." Alexander's voice cracked. "And 47 other families. Maybe more. I don't even know the full count." He hung up. The phone rang immediately. Marcus, furious. Alexander silenced it. For 3 hours, he sat at his desk and did something he had never done before. He researched the families he destroyed. One by one, he found them. Social media posts, obituaries, bankruptcy filings, children who had to drop out of college, wives who had to work 3 jobs, dreams deferred, lives derailed, futures stolen. By noon, Alexander Bourne was crying at his desk. By 2 p.m., he made a decision. He picked up the envelope, dialed the number with shaking hands. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. "Hello, Mr. Bourne." Ethan's voice was steady, calm. "I honestly didn't think you'd call." "What do I need to do?" Alexander asked, his voice hoarse. Silence. Then, "You really want to know?" "I want to make this right. However I can. Whatever it costs." Another pause. When Ethan spoke again, his voice was different. Younger. More vulnerable. "There's a press conference room downtown. I've already reserved it for 6 p.m. tonight. I've already sent invitations to every major news outlet. They think they're coming for a major corporate announcement from Alexander Bourne." A breath. "You're going to stand at that podium, and you're going to tell the truth. All of it. Every illegal deal, every family you destroyed, every life you ruined." Alexander's hand tightened on the phone. "And then? Then you're going to announce the establishment of the Morrison Foundation. $20 million, not 10, for the 47 families and any others who come forward. You're going to personally call each family and apologize. And then, Mr. Bourne, you're going to surrender yourself to federal authorities and accept whatever punishment the law demands. I'll lose everything, Alexander whispered. No, Ethan said softly. You'll lose your empire. But maybe, if you're brave enough to face what you've done, you'll find something you lost a long time ago. What's that? Your humanity. The line went dead. Alexander sat in silence, staring at his phone. At 2:37 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, Alexander Bourne had 5 hours to prepare for his own destruction, or possibly his salvation. He picked up his phone again and called his assistant. Cancel everything and prepare a statement. I have a press conference at 6. What's it regarding, sir? Alexander looked at his reflection in the window. He barely recognized the man staring back. The truth, he said. It's regarding the truth. The hours crawled by like years. Alexander wrote and rewrote his confession 17 times. Each version felt inadequate. How do you condense decades of cruelty into a speech? How do you apologize for ruining lives, for stealing futures, for playing God with other people's existence? At 4 p.m., his phone exploded with calls. Marcus, his board members, his publicist. Word had leaked about the press conference. Everyone wanted to know what he was planning. Everyone sensed something catastrophic was coming. He ignored them all. At 4:30, there was a knock on his office door. Come in, he said quietly. Elena entered, and for the first time in 5 years, Alexander really looked at her, saw the strength in her face, the exhaustion, the love she carried for her son, the dignity she maintained despite everything he put her through. You called the number, she said. I did. And you're really going to do it? Confess everything? Alexander nodded. I'm terrified, but yes. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She sat down across from him, this woman who cleaned his floors and made his coffee while carrying the weight of her murdered husband and traumatized son. David would have liked that, she whispered. He always believed people could change. Even at the end, when we lost everything, he'd say, Alina, maybe someday Alexander Bourne will realize what he's done. Maybe someday he'll become the man he pretends to be. Alexander's throat tightened. I don't deserve his faith. No, Elena agreed. You don't. But that's what made David special. He believed in redemption even when it seemed impossible. She leaned forward. My husband was a good man, Mr. Bourne. He loved his family. He treated his employees like family. He donated to charity even when we couldn't really afford it. And you killed him. Maybe not with a weapon, but with your greed and your callousness and your complete inability to see people as anything other than obstacles or tools. Each word was true. Each word deserved. But, Elena continued, her voice softer, David also believed that every person contains both light and darkness, and that we choose every single day which one we feed. Today, you're choosing differently. That doesn't erase what you did. It doesn't bring David back. But it's a start. Will you be there? Alexander asked. At the press conference? Yes. Ethan and I will both be there. We need to see this through. And after? After I confess and turn myself in? Elena stood, smoothing her uniform. After, you pay your debt, and we try to rebuild our lives with the knowledge that just maybe David's death meant something, that it changed something, that justice, even when it comes late, still matters. She walked to the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Mr. Bourne, I hope you find peace in prison, the kind my husband never got to feel in his final months because of what you did to him. The door closed softly behind her. Alexander sat alone with his confession, with his fear, with the choice he made. At 5:15, his phone rang one last time, an unknown number. Hello? It's Ethan. A pause. I need to tell you something before tonight. What is it? When I was 12 and Papa died, I promised myself I'd destroy you. I studied you like you were a test I had to pass. I learned everything about your company, your deals, your secrets. I became obsessed with bringing you down. His voice wavered, but somewhere along the way, watching you for 5 years, I realized something. What? You're already destroyed. You have everything, money, power, luxury, and you have nothing. No one loves you. No one trusts you. You're alone in a penthouse surrounded by things you bought with blood money. You destroyed my family, Mr. Bourne, but you destroyed yourself too. Alexander closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. Tonight isn't about revenge anymore, Ethan continued. It's about giving you a chance to be something other than the man who killed my father. It's about letting you choose redemption, because Papa would want that. He'd want you to have the chance he never got." "Why?" Alexander whispered. "Why give me any chance at all?" "Because hate was eating me alive, because Mama deserves peace, and because maybe if you face what you've done with courage instead of cowardice, some good can come from all this pain." The line went quiet for a moment. "There are 47 families waiting for your call, Mr. Bourne. 47 lives you need to face. It's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done, but it's also going to be the only thing you've ever done that actually matters." "I'm scared, Ethan." "Good," the boy said. "Papa was scared too, every day after you destroyed him. Now you get to understand what that feels like, and maybe that fear will make you human again." The call ended. At 5:45 p.m., Alexander Bourne left his penthouse for the last time as a free man. His driver waited downstairs, confused by the early departure, by the fact that Mr. Bourne was carrying no briefcase, no notes, nothing but a single piece of paper with a confession written in his own hand. The city lights blurred past the window. Alexander had built an empire in this city. He conquered it, owned it, controlled it. Now he was about to tear it all down. And for the first time in 30 years, he felt something other than emptiness. He felt purpose. The press conference room was packed. Alexander stood backstage, listening to the murmur of reporters, the click of cameras being prepared, the anticipation that hummed through the air like electricity. They come expecting a product launch, a merger announcement, something to add to the legend of Alexander Bourne. They were about to get something very different. Elena and Ethan stood, near the back of the room, barely visible. Alexander caught Ethan's eye. The boy nodded once. Not forgiveness, not friendship, just acknowledgement. Do it. Face what you are. At exactly 6 p.m., Alexander walked onto the stage. The murmurs stopped, cameras flashed, microphones went live. He stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, and for a moment his courage faltered. Everything he built, everything he became, was about to crumble. One speech, one confession, and Alexander Bourne would transform from titan to criminal. His hands shook as he unfolded his paper. "Good evening," he began, his voice surprisingly steady. "My name is Alexander Bourne. Most of you know me as a successful businessman, a billionaire, a leader in tech and real estate. But tonight, I'm here to tell you who I really am." The room went silent. "I am a man who built his fortune on other people's suffering. I am a man who destroyed families, ruined lives, and never looked back. I am a man who prioritized profit over people, success over morality, and empire over humanity." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked faster. "For 30 years, I have lied, cheated, bribed, and manipulated my way to the top. I have acquired companies and destroyed them. I have made promises I never intended to keep. I have ruined good people for no reason other than greed and ambition." Alexander's voice cracked. He pushed forward. 7 years ago, I acquired a small tech company in Seattle called Morrison Tech. The founder, David Morrison, trusted me when I promised to protect his employees. 3 months later, I liquidated everything and fired everyone. David Morrison lost his livelihood, his savings, and his future. 18 months after that, the stress of what I did to him caused a fatal heart attack. He died at 46 years old, leaving behind a wife and a 12-year-old son. He looked directly at Elena and Ethan. "That wife has been my maid for 5 years. That son has lived in my home, watching me, studying me, gathering evidence of every illegal thing I've done. And tonight, that son gave me a choice: confess and face justice, or run and be exposed as the coward I am." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras swarmed. Alexander raised his hand for silence. "David Morrison isn't the only family I destroyed. Over 3 decades, I have ruined at least 47 families that we've documented. The real number is probably much higher. Tonight, I am announcing the creation of the Morrison Foundation with an initial endowment of $20 million to support these families. I am also announcing that tomorrow morning, I will surrender myself to federal authorities to answer for my crimes." A female reporter stood up. "Mr. Bourne, why now? Why confess after all these years?" Alexander's eyes found Ethan again. "Because a 17-year-old boy showed more courage and integrity in 5 years than I've shown in my entire life." Because I finally looked in the mirror and hated what I saw. And because his voice broke completely. Because I'm tired of being a monster. I'm tired of destroying lives. I'm tired of sleeping in silk sheets while the ghosts of the people I've hurt haunt my dreams. Another reporter, do you expect forgiveness? No, Alexander said simply. I don't deserve forgiveness. I deserve prison. I deserve to lose everything. But I hope that by facing what I've done, by trying to make even small amends, maybe some good can come from all the pain I've caused. He pulled out a list from his pocket. I'm going to read 47 names now, 47 families I destroyed. If you're listening, if you're watching, I want you to know that I see you. I acknowledge what I did to you, and I am so deeply sorry. What followed was 15 minutes of names, each one a life, each one a story, each one a wound Alexander had inflicted. Sarah Chen, Thomas Wright, the Johnson family, on and on. By the time he finished, tears were streaming down his face. Several reporters were crying too. The room had gone from hostile to stunned to something else, something human. I'll take questions now, Alexander said quietly. For 45 minutes, he answered every question with brutal honesty, every illegal deal, every bribe, every manipulation. He named politicians he bought, officials he corrupted, companies he destroyed. He burned his entire empire to the ground on live television. And when it was finally over, when the reporters had exhausted their questions, Alexander walked off the stage and directly to Elena and Ethan. I meant every word, he told them. Elena's face was wet with tears. I know. Ethan studied him for a long moment, this boy who lost his childhood to grief and revenge, who spent 5 years living in the house of his father's killer, planning justice. My father's grave is in Oakwood Cemetery, Ethan said quietly. Section C, Plot 47. There's no headstone, because we couldn't afford one. Maybe, before you turn yourself in tomorrow, you could visit him. Tell him what you told the world tonight. Apologize to him, even if he can't hear it. Alexander nodded, unable to speak. And Mr. Bourne? Ethan's voice softened. Thank you for choosing to be brave. Papa would have liked that. The boy turned and walked away with his mother, leaving Alexander standing alone in the now empty conference room, surrounded by the ruins of his empire and the first real peace he felt in decades. He lost everything, and somehow he gained something infinitely more valuable, his humanity. The world exploded overnight. By morning, Alexander's confession had gone viral. Every news outlet, every social media platform, every conversation in every coffee shop and office across the country was about Alexander Bourne's spectacular fall from grace. The reactions were mixed and brutal. Some called him a hero for his honesty. Most called him a monster who deserved everything coming to him. His board of directors held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove him. His company's stock price plummeted. Federal prosecutors announced a major investigation. Lawsuits began filing before dawn. Alexander sat in his penthouse, soon to be seized as evidence, and watched his life burn on every screen. His phone rang constantly, death threats, media requests, former business partners cursing him. But also, surprisingly, a few calls from people thanking him for his honesty, for facing what he did. At 8 a.m., he received a call from a number he hadn't seen in 3 years. Christina, he answered, his daughter's name catching in his throat. Silence. Then, I watched your press conference. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not calling to forgive you, Dad. Her voice was cold, distant. I'm calling because I need to know if it was real, the confession, the remorse, or was it just another manipulation, another angle? Alexander closed his eyes, his brilliant, beautiful daughter who cut him out of her life because she couldn't stand what he became. It was real, Christina, all of it. I've been a monster, to those families, to you, to everyone I've ever known. You destroyed that man, she whispered. David Morrison, you killed him and then hired his widow to clean your floors. What kind of person does that? A person who stopped seeing people as human, a person who cared only about winning, about building, about conquering. His voice cracked. A person I'm ashamed to be. Long silence. I don't know if I can ever have a relationship with you again, Christina finally said. But I'm glad you're facing what you did. I'm glad you're finally being held accountable. Mom and I have been waiting for this for years. How is your mother? She's doing well. She remarried. Someone kind. Someone who actually sees her as a person, not a possession. A pause. She said to tell you that she hopes you find peace in prison, that she hopes this is real and not just another game. It's real, Alexander whispered. Tell her I'm sorry for the 20 years I stole from her, for being a husband in name only, for choosing ambition over love. I will. Another long silence. Goodbye, Dad. Christina, wait, but the line was already dead. Alexander sat with the phone in his hand, feeling the weight of everything he lost. His daughter, his son who wouldn't even take his calls, his ex-wife who spent 2 decades married to a man who never really saw her. At 10 a.m., his lawyer Marcus called. You're facing 60 to 90 years in federal prison, Marcus said without preamble. With cooperation, maybe 40. You've confessed to racketeering, wire fraud, bribery, extortion, and about 15 other felonies. Your assets will be seized. Your company is finished. Your reputation is destroyed. Alexander, what the hell were you thinking? I was thinking about a 12-year-old boy finding his father dead on the floor. That's not your responsibility. It is exactly my responsibility. Alexander's voice rose. I did that, Marcus. I killed that man as surely as if I pulled a trigger, and I did it to 47 other families. How many more? How many people did I destroy while you helped me cover it up? Silence on the other end. I'm done, Marcus. I'm done running. I'm done lying. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I'm surrendering to federal authorities and I'm pleading guilty to everything. Alexander, please, think about what you're... He hung up. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Alexander spent it doing something he should have done years ago. He called families. One by one, he found phone numbers, and he called the people he destroyed. Some hung up immediately. Some screamed at him. Some cried. A few, surprisingly, thanked him for finally acknowledging what he had done. Each call was agony. Each conversation is a knife. But Alexander pushed through, because this was his penance. This was the price of redemption. At 4 p.m., he drove to Oakwood Cemetery. Section C, Plot 47, was easy to find. A simple grave with no headstone, just a metal marker with a number. Alexander stood over David Morrison's final resting place and felt the full weight of what he had done. I don't know if you can hear me, Alexander said quietly. I don't know if there's anything after death, but I need to tell you that I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry for what I did to you, to your family, to your legacy. The wind rustled through the trees. Birds sang. Life continued around this quiet grave. Your son, Ethan, he's remarkable, strong and brave and good in ways I've never been. Your wife, Alina, she's one of the strongest people I've ever met. You raised a beautiful family, David. You built something real and meaningful, and I destroyed it because I couldn't see beyond profit margins and stock prices. Alexander knelt down, placed his hand on the cold earth. Tomorrow I'm going to prison. I'll probably die there, but I wanted you to know that your death wasn't meaningless. It woke me up. Your son's courage showed me what I had become, and I'm going to spend whatever time I have left trying to be better, trying to repair what I can, trying to be the man you were. Tears fell onto the grave. I'm sorry I took you from your family. I'm sorry I stole your future. I'm sorry for all of it. He stayed there until the sun began to set, a billionaire, kneeling in the dirt beside the grave of the man he killed, finally understanding the cost of his ambition. Finally understanding that some things can't be bought, rebuilt, or conquered. Only grieved. Only regret. Only faced with the brutal honesty of accountability. As he walked back to his car, Alexander saw 2 figures standing by the cemetery entrance. Elena and Ethan. They've been watching. Ethan walked toward him slowly, and for the first time, Alexander saw something other than cold determination in the boy's eyes. He saw a glimmer of peace. Thank you for coming here, Ethan said, for talking to him. He would have appreciated that. It doesn't change anything, Alexander said. No, Ethan agreed, but it matters anyway. The boy extended his hand. Alexander stared at it, this 17-year-old who lived through hell, who planned justice with the patience of someone twice his age, who gave him the chance to choose redemption, and he took it. They shook hands over David Morrison's grave. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but acknowledgement, recognition, the beginning of something that might, in time, resemble healing. Tomorrow, Ethan said, when you turn yourself in, know that my mother and I will be at peace. Not because you're suffering, but because justice is finally being served. Because the man who destroyed our family had the courage to face what he did. Alexander nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. As Elena and Ethan walked away, Alexander stood alone in the cemetery, watching the sun set on the last day of his freedom. He lost his empire, his wealth, his power, his reputation. But standing there in that cemetery, having finally faced the devastation he caused, Alexander Bourne had found something he lost decades ago: his soul. The morning of his surrender came with unexpected clarity. Alexander woke at 5 a.m. in his penthouse for the last time. He dressed simply, no expensive suit, no designer watch, no symbols of the empire he built, just jeans and a button-down shirt, the clothes of a man, not a monument. At 6 a.m., there was a knock on his door. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened it, he found 40 people standing in his hallway. Men and women, young and old, some in business attire, others in casual clothes. They looked at him with a mix of emotions: anger, pain, curiosity, something else he couldn't quite name. "Who are you?" Alexander asked, though his heart already knew. A woman stepped forward. She was in her 50s, with kind eyes and worry lines etched deep into her face. "My name is Sarah Chen," she said. "7 years ago, you bought the building that housed my family's restaurant. You tripled our rent. We lost everything." Alexander's breath caught. "I remember. God, I remember. I'm so sorry." "I'm not here for your apology," Sarah interrupted, but her voice wasn't cruel. "I'm here because you called me yesterday. You acknowledged what you did. You actually said my name, told my story, and for the first time in 7 years, someone in power admitted that what happened to us was wrong." A man stepped forward next, older, gray-haired, with the weathered hands of someone who worked hard his entire life. "Thomas Wright," he said. "You framed me for embezzlement. I spent 3 years in prison. I lost my career, my marriage, my relationship with my kids." "I know," Alexander whispered. "Mr. Wright, I'm not here for revenge either," Thomas said. "I'm here because last night, after you called, my daughter called me for the first time in 5 years. She saw your confession. She heard you say my name, and she said, 'Dad, I believe you now. I'm sorry I didn't believe you before. You gave me my daughter back.'" One by one, they introduced themselves, each one a name from Alexander's list, each one a life he destroyed, and each one had come, not to attack him, but to witness his reckoning. "Why are you all here?" Alexander finally asked, his voice breaking. Sarah Chen stepped forward again. "Because accountability matters. Because watching powerful men face consequences is so rare that when it happens, we need to see it. We need to know it's real." And Thomas Wright added, "Because a 17-year-old boy taught us something about justice. Not revenge, not violence, just truth and courage." Behind them, Elena and Ethan appeared in the hallway. Ethan looked at the gathering of people his father's killer had wronged, and his eyes filled with tears. "Papa would be proud," Elena whispered to her son. "Justice doesn't have to be cruel to be real." At 8:30 a.m., Alexander Bourne walked out of his penthouse for the last time, surrounded by the 47 families he destroyed. But they weren't there to destroy him back. They were there to witness redemption. At 9 a.m., Alexander walked into the federal building with his head held high. News cameras caught every moment. The world watched as Alexander Bourne, billionaire, empire builder, destroyer of lives, surrendered himself to justice. As federal agents placed him in handcuffs, Alexander turned to find Ethan and Elena in the crowd. Ethan nodded once, not forgiveness, but recognition. Justice had finally arrived, and it had come through the courage of a boy who chose truth over revenge, patience over violence, redemption over ruin. As they led Alexander away, he felt something he hadn't felt in 30 years. Hope. Not hope for escape. Not hope for mercy. Hope that maybe facing what he did with courage instead of cowardice meant something. Hope that his daughter might someday be proud of him. Hope that in his remaining years, he could do more good than harm. Hope that David Morrison's death had meaning. The doors closed behind him, the cameras stopped rolling, and Alexander Bourne began the long journey of paying for his sins. But this time, he wasn't running from them, he was facing them, and that made all the difference. Hey Soul Tales family, I need to hear from you right now. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to face something you did wrong? Have you ever had to choose between running away or standing up and taking responsibility? Because that's what this story is really about. Not just Alexander's redemption, but all of our moments where we choose courage over cowardice. And if this story is touching your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, because stories about real redemption, real justice, real courage, that's what Soul Tales is all about. Now let me show you what happened next. Because the story doesn't end with handcuffs and prison bars. Real redemption? That's just the beginning. 3 years later, Federal Correctional Institution, Oakdale. Alexander Bourne, prisoner number 847392, sat in the prison library tutoring inmates for their GED exams. His hair had gone completely gray. His expensive suits had been replaced with prison oranges. His empire had been liquidated, the assets distributed to the families he destroyed. He was sentenced to 42 years. With good behavior, he might see freedom again at 87. But something strange had happened in these 3 years. Alexander had found peace. He taught classes, mentored young inmates, worked in the prison garden, wrote letters to the families, apologizing over and over, asking nothing in return. Some wrote back. Most didn't. He understood. The Morrison Foundation had grown beyond his initial $20 million. Other reformed executives had contributed. Scholarships were established, businesses were rebuilt, families were healing. On a Tuesday afternoon, a guard approached. "Bourne, you have visitors." Alexander's heart stuttered. His daughter had visited once briefly 2 years ago. They spoke for 20 minutes through glass, and she cried the entire time. She hadn't come back, and he understood that too. But when he entered the visiting room, it wasn't Christina. It was Elena and Ethan. Ethan was 20 now, taller, stronger. He wore a college sweatshirt, Stanford, full scholarship, studying business ethics and social justice. His eyes were different now, lighter, less burdened. "Hello, Mr. Bourne," Ethan said, sitting across from him. "Ethan, Elena." Alexander's voice cracked. "I never expected." "We come twice a year," Elena interrupted gently. "We've been coming since you were sentenced. You just never knew, because we'd sit in the visitor gallery during your hearings, watching you testify, watching you plead guilty to everything without trying to minimize or escape." Alexander's eyes filled with tears. "Why?" Ethan leaned forward. "Because 3 years ago, you did something remarkable. You chose truth over comfort. You chose accountability over escape. You gave us something we didn't know we needed." "What's that?" "Closure," Elena said softly. "For 3 years before your confession, I was drowning in rage and grief. Ethan was consumed by revenge. We were trapped in the past, held prisoner by what you did. But when you faced it, when you named David, when you apologized to the world, something broke free in us. We could finally grieve properly," Ethan added. "We could finally start healing, because you acknowledged what you had done. You didn't minimize it or justify it. You just faced it." Alexander wiped his eyes. "I think about your father every day, about all of them. The weight never gets lighter." "It's not supposed to," Ethan said. "That weight is your reminder, your compass, the thing that keeps you human." Elena reached across the table, almost touching the glass that separated them. "David would be proud of what you've become, Mr. Bourne. Not what you were, not the empire builder, but this, the man who teaches prisoners to read, who owns his sins, who tries every day to be better." "The Morrison Foundation helped my mother finish her degree," Ethan said. "She's a social worker now, helping families in crisis, and I'm studying to change the system that lets people like you hurt people like my dad. We've turned our pain into purpose." "Just like you have," Elena added. Alexander shook his head. "I'm in prison. I've lost everything." "No," Ethan said firmly. "You've lost your empire, but you've gained something infinitely more valuable. You've gained integrity, conscience, humanity, the things that actually matter." They talked for an hour about Elena's work, about Ethan's studies, about the other families, how they were rebuilding, about forgiveness, not yet, maybe never, but something close, understanding, acknowledgement, peace. As visiting hours ended, Ethan stood. "Mr. Bourne, I need to tell you something. When I was 12 and Papa died, I made a vow. I vowed to destroy the man who destroyed him. But you know what?" "What?" "You did that yourself. You destroyed Alexander Bourne, the billionaire, the monster, the man who crushed families without thought. And in his place, you've built something better, something real." "I don't feel better," Alexander whispered. "You're not supposed to feel better," Ethan said. "You're supposed to feel responsible. and then do something about it, which is exactly what you're doing. As they prepared to leave, Elena placed her hand against the glass. Alexander placed his hand opposite hers. "Thank you," she whispered, "for having the courage to face what you did, for giving us peace, for proving that even the worst people can choose redemption." They left, and Alexander Bourne sat in that visiting room, crying, grieving, and somehow impossibly grateful. Grateful that a 17-year-old boy had given him the choice to face his sins instead of running from them. Grateful that justice had come, not through violence, but through truth. Grateful that even in prison, stripped of everything he built, he finally found what he's been searching for his entire life: purpose, meaning, peace. The guard came to escort him back to his cell. As Alexander walked the familiar corridors, past men serving time for their own mistakes, he thought about David Morrison, about the 12-year-old boy who found his father dead, about the choice he was given and the courage it took to make it. And for the first time in decades, Alexander Bourne smiled, not because he was happy, but because he was finally, authentically, completely human. 5 years after his surrender. Ethan Morrison stood at the podium of the Stanford Business School auditorium, preparing to give his graduate thesis presentation. The room was packed with students, professors, and special guests. His thesis, Accountability Without Destruction: How Restorative Justice Transforms Corporate Crime. His mother sat in the front row, beaming with pride. She remarried, a kind man named James who treated her like a queen. She healed. They both healed. But there was someone else Ethan wanted to be there. Through a special video conference setup, Alexander Bourne appeared on a screen at the back of the auditorium, broadcasting from the prison library. He was granted special permission to attend virtually. 5 years ago, Ethan began, I stood in my employer's bedroom at 2:47 in the morning, holding evidence that could destroy him. He killed my father, not with his hands, but with his greed. I had every reason to ruin him without mercy. The audience listened, but my mother taught me something. She said, "Ethan, revenge makes you feel powerful for a moment, but it leaves you empty forever. Real justice gives everyone a chance to be better than their worst moment." He looked at Alexander's image on the screen. I gave him a choice, and he made it. He chose accountability. He chose the truth. He chose to face what he had done, even knowing it would cost him everything. Ethan clicked a slide showing statistics. The Morrison Foundation has now helped 127 families. It funded 43 small businesses. It provided 89 college scholarships. It's created systemic change in how corporate accountability is handled. Another slide. More importantly, it's shown that redemption is real, that people can change. That justice doesn't have to be about destruction. It can be about transformation. He paused, emotion thick in his voice. My father, David Morrison, was a good man. He believed in second chances. He believed people were more than their mistakes. And even though the man who destroyed him took years to face his guilt, when he finally did, it honored my father's memory. It proved Papa was right about human nature. The audience was silent, many wiping tears. Today, I'm announcing a new initiative, the David Morrison Center for Corporate Ethics and Accountability. It will work with business leaders who want to reform their practices, who want to choose integrity over profit, who want to be better. He looked directly at the camera. And our first advisory board member, consulting from prison, will be Alexander Bourne. Because who better to teach accountability than someone who learned it the hardest way possible? The audience erupted in applause. On the screen, Alexander was crying, his hand over his heart. After the presentation, Ethan called the prison. You didn't have to do that, Alexander said, his voice shaking. You didn't have to give me purpose again. Yes, I did, Ethan replied, because that's what justice looks like. Not revenge, not punishment without purpose, but accountability that transforms, that heals, that makes the world better. I'll never forgive myself, Alexander whispered. I know, Ethan said gently, but you don't need to forgive yourself. You need to keep doing the work, keep teaching, keep helping, keep proving that even people who've done terrible things can choose to be better. A long pause. Your father would be proud of you, Ethan. I wish I could have known him. You do know him, Ethan said. Every time you choose accountability over escape, every time you help someone in prison turn their life around, Every time you use your story to prevent others from making your mistakes, that's Papa's legacy living through you. They talked for a few more minutes, then said goodbye. As Ethan left Stanford that day, his diploma in hand, his future bright before him, he stopped at a familiar place, Oakwood Cemetery, Section C, Plot 47. But it looks different now. Where there had once been just a numbered metal marker, there now stood a beautiful granite headstone, David Morrison, beloved father, husband, friend. His legacy lives in justice, love, and second chances, 1968-2018. Below the inscription, smaller text, funded by the Morrison Foundation and Alexander Bourne, in memory of a good man whose death changed everything. Ethan knelt beside his father's grave, touching the stone. Papa, I did it. I finished my degree. Mama's happy. The foundation is helping people. And the man who killed you, he's spending his life trying to make it right. The wind rustled through the trees, warm and gentle. I don't know if I've forgiven him. Maybe I never will. But I've let go of the hate. I've turned our pain into purpose, just like you would have wanted. Ethan stood, placing flowers on the grave. Thank you for teaching me that being a good man means choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. Thank you for showing me that justice without compassion is just revenge wearing a mask. Thank you for being my father. As he walked away, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt since he was 12 years old, complete peace. The weight he carried for 8 years, the responsibility of being the man of the house at 12, the burden of planning justice for 5 years, the pressure of holding someone accountable while staying human, had finally lifted. His father's death had meaning. Alexander's redemption was real. And justice, true justice, had won. Not through violence, not through revenge, but through courage, truth, and the radical belief that people can change if given the choice and the accountability to match. Soul Tales family, we've reached the end of this journey together. This story was never just about a billionaire and a maid's son. It was about all of us. About the choices we make when we've been hurt. About whether we choose revenge or redemption. About whether we believe people can change. Ethan could have destroyed Alexander with violence. He chose the truth instead. Alexander could have run from his sins. He chose to face them instead. Alina could have let hate consume her. She chose healing instead. And because of those choices, 47 families found justice. 127 families found help. And 2 broken people, a boy who lost his father and a man who lost his humanity, found peace. Now I want to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me, have you ever had to choose between revenge and redemption? Have you ever forgiven someone who didn't deserve it? Have you ever been forgiven when you didn't deserve it? Your story matters. Your voice matters. This community matters. If this story touched your soul, hit that subscribe button and join the Soul Tales family. Because every week, we're here telling stories that remind us what it means to be human. The good, the bad, the complicated, and the redemptive. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone carrying hate. Share it with someone who's made mistakes. Share it with someone who needs to believe that redemption is real. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, keep choosing courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and redemption over revenge. This is Soul Tales, reminding you that every person contains both light and darkness, and every single day we get to choose which one we feed. See you in the next story. Justice isn't about destruction, it's about transformation. And sometimes the greatest act of courage is giving someone the choice to be better than their worst moment.